I'm Tom Mancheri, and this is Chocolate Avenue Baking Company. I bring 35 years of baking industry experience and the research to back up my recipes so that you don't have to look like a dingbat baking subpar desserts. Now, I've never heard anybody say that they wanted to bake a mediocre cheesecake for their friends, family, and loved ones. So today, I'm bringing you my tried and true cheesecake recipe that features a made from scratch graham cracker crust and a slightly dense yet extremely creamy cheesecake batter. As if that weren't enough, we're topping our cheesecake with a sour cherry conserve. I'm really excited to bring this to you, so let's not waste any more time. One thing I can tell you after working many years in the commercial bakery business is that everybody has a cheesecake recipe. And people are highly opinionated about their cheesecake recipe and always think it's the best. I mean, heck, everybody and their grandma has a cheesecake recipe on YouTube. And I was doing some research for this episode because I knew I wanted to do a cheesecake. I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so I was researching back and looking at a lot of the different videos on YouTube and also in baking text. And a lot of the information out there is almost guaranteed to make your cheesecake a flop. So I'm going to try to save you a ton of heartbreak and problems because making a truly incredible cheesecake is really not that easy of a task. Is if you ask any professional pastry chef, they'll tell you you got to do things right. So I'm going to just try to stick to the absolute classic and the tried and true and the things that I know from experience and just show you how to make a classic awesome cheesecake. If you want truly the absolute best, you're going to have to make your own graham crackers. Now if you don't want the absolute best, then just skip through the next 4 or 5 minutes and don't worry about that. Just go buy one of those little nefarious boxes of stuff there. You know what I'm talking about. But I'm going to show you real quick how I made these graham crackers, and then we're going to put together our cheesecake crust. Okay, so real quick here, I'm just going to show you how to make homemade graham crackers. What I have here is 12 ounces of organic all-purpose flour, and to that I'm just going to blend in 3 ounces of unsalted Kerrygold in little chunks. It's going to go right into the bowl. Also have a teaspoon of baking powder, teaspoon of salt, sea salt. I have 2 ounces of organic whole wheat flour, which I'm going to sift that in as well. And this is 2 ounces of organic brown sugar. So that's all your dry ingredients. So then I'm just going to use my hands here and work all this together, make sure everything's well combined in there. So once you have that butter nicely mixed into that, what we're going to do next is, this is 6 ounces of honey and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Spread that over the butter and flour mixture. So then, just to make a little bit less of a mess, you can bring this together with a rubber spatula until you get a nice shaggy dough happening there. And what I have here is 1/3 of a cup of cold water, and I may not use it all, so just put about a tablespoon at a time in there until this comes together as a nice dough. I'm just going to bring this together, and then all you're going to do with this is just roll this out to about 1/8 of an inch and cut it up into pieces, put it on a sheet pan with parchment paper, and bake it in a 325-degree oven for about 15 minutes or until golden brown and delicious. Okay, so hopefully now you've made your graham crackers and they've turned out and they look something like this, and you've cooled them down pretty well. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put together our cheesecake crust. Now, in order to avoid a lot of the pitfalls, I highly recommend, and by the way, I'm using a 10-inch springform pan here, but I highly recommend that you liberally butter the bottom and sides of your pan, and don't just put parchment on the bottom, put parchment on the sides. And this will definitely help you, trust me. Just do that and you won't have as many issues on molding it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to measure out 14 ounces. Now this is for this recipe, which is down, the full recipe is down in the description box. This recipe is for one 10-inch cheesecake like this, and this will feed a crowd. Weigh out 14 ounces of these graham crackers that you painstakingly made. And if you do this, you will be rewarded with an extraordinary cheesecake. Trust me. I've made this enough to know that this recipe works out pretty well. Gotta get a bigger food processor. Pulse this till it's fairly fine. As soon as you start getting that going, I have 2 ounces or 1/4 cup of dark brown sugar, organic, 5 ounces of melted Kerrygold butter. Pulse, scrape just a little bit, make sure it's all well combined. And when you're done, you should end up with something that will hold its shape a little bit. Not too wet, shouldn't be dripping with butter. But then the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to pile these crumbs straight into our prepared springform pan. Just pile them all in, blade and all, just like that. So I'm just going to use this measuring cup here and start working these in here. If you put a little pressure on the sides, your crumb mixture should hold its shape fairly well. We're just going to set this in the oven at 325 or so, just for about 10 minutes until it just sets. And then we'll move on to the cheesecake batter. Okay, so once you have your crust sorted out, what we're going to do now is there's 2 things you want to make sure that you do before you even put your batter together. And the first thing you want to do, preheat your oven to 350 if you're using a straight oven. Unfortunately, I have no choice but to use convection. You're really not supposed to, because what can happen is the hot air can puff it up, and then when you take it out of the oven, it can kind of crater. So it's sort of a no-no to use a convection oven for cheesecake, but unfortunately I can't turn my convection off on this oven, so I'm going in at 325. If you're just using your home oven without forced air, then just go for 350. Or if you have convection that can turn off, you can use that. Just turn off the convection, it'll be fine. So I'm also, as another precaution, is I'm baking this in a water bath, which, if you're not familiar with, is just put some heavy duty foil. I'm using 2 layers on your prepared pan and crust, and then just put it in there and then carefully pour some boiling water. It's important to use boiling hot water when you're doing this, or it'll take, unless you don't care if your cheesecake takes 3 days to bake. But if you use the hot water in there, it'll definitely help the custard set up properly without cracks, which is what you want. And the other thing is, don't use boiling tap water for this, unless you don't care about basting your cheesecake in a toxic chloramine mist. But that's your choice. But anyway, be careful pouring it into the pan. So that's the 2 things that we have to do before you even start on your batter. So once you've taken care of that, what I'm going to do, this should come together. If you prep everything out as I've done here, this really should not take you that long. Half of the battle of a great cheesecake is in the mise en place, or the prep, as you might say. So what I'm going to do is quickly just go through all of these ingredients real fast here. Okay, so I have 2.5 pounds, and again, this is for a 10-inch cheesecake. 2.5 pounds of organic cream cheese here, brick style. I'm using Organic Valley. It's pretty widely available. This is 5 ounces of organic sour cream. I have 12 ounces of organic granulated sugar, 2 ounces of sifted non-GMO cornstarch. I've got 1 tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice, and the zest of that lemon. I used about a tablespoon of the zest. And in case you have never done this before, you just get yourself one of these microplane zesters. Just zest like that. Make your life a lot easier to do that. I have a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I have 5 whole eggs and 2 yolks, organic free-range eggs. And what I've done here is I've split a vanilla bean, and I'm reserving half of this bean for the sour cherry conserve that we're going to make. But I'm going to seed that right into the batter. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is put our room temperature 2.5 pounds of cream cheese into the large mixing bowl of a stand mixer. I would not recommend really any other way of mixing this. If you do not have a stand mixer, your next best bet would be one of those handheld units. Although it'll be kind of challenging, but you can always give that a shot. And as always, and even more importantly with cheesecake, always make sure that your ingredients are at room temperature. I've had this out on the counter overnight. So to that 2.5 pounds of cream cheese, I'm putting in 12 ounces of granulated sugar, putting on the paddle attachment here. And I have noticed that for some reason a lot of people seem to like to use the whisk attachment for this, which I would highly recommend that you do not do that. Use your paddle, because the whisk can whip a lot of unnecessary air into the batter, which is not desirable and could cause your cheesecake to cave. So put this on low, and if your ingredients are totally at room temperature, you should have no problem incorporating that. Increase the speed a little bit, but try to keep your speed lower and just scrape down the bowl. And I think that's a better bet than trying to whip this on high, too high. Just kind of keep this low and slow. So now I'm going to mix in this cornstarch here after the sugar. I'm going in with a tablespoon of lemon juice and a tablespoon of the lemon zest, teaspoon of vanilla extract. Going to put in a half of a vanilla bean seeded, and then simply just start adding in your eggs, 1 or 2 at a time. And again, this is 5 whole eggs and 2 yolks. Just do it nice and low and slow. Wait until each egg is incorporated. And just continue scraping down the bowl and adding the eggs one at a time until this comes together. And then last but not least, 5 ounces of the organic sour cream, room temperature. Okay, so once you're ready to fill your graham cracker crust and everything is nice and smooth, just go ahead and pour it in there. Closer to boiling, the better off you are. So just be careful with this. I'm wearing oven mitts. And fill that. You want this water to be about halfway up the side. Okay, so our cheesecake is reading an internal temperature of just about 150 to 160 degrees. So I know that it's set properly after cooling for an hour in the oven. Maybe a little firm, but I think we're looking golden. Now, it's a little jiggly in the center. That's where you want things to be, but totally set. And I wish I could say that we could just portion this up right now and put some of that sour cherry conserve on top and dive right in. But nope, unfortunately, this cheesecake needs to sit in the refrigerator, tightly wrapped overnight. So now it's time to talk about the topping that I want to put over this cheesecake. And this one is a little bit different. It's a sour cherry conserve. For those of you who have had the pleasure of cooking or baking with sour cherries, I don't have to even introduce this to you to tell you how special this stuff is. Here on the East Coast, it's a little bit more difficult to get your hands on this. I happened to find these at a local grocery store. This is from a company called Musselman's, who is local to the Hershey area. It's in a little town called Biglerville, PA, and these are in a water pack. So I've just strained out the cherry juice, and I'm reserving that, and going to put the cherries in a side bowl there. Strain out 2 cans of these. And if you've never had these before, when I say these are sour cherries, I mean it. Okay, they're nothing like the sweet cherries you're probably used to. They're nothing like that sweet cherry pie filling at all. They're a whole different animal. But you've got to try to get your hands on some of this stuff, because it really is amazing. I know you can order it online. I think you can get it canned, or even better is frozen if you can get it. I don't know if I've ever seen them fresh in my area. I don't think I've ever seen these fresh. But anyway, strain that out, and then we're just going to take that liquid and put it into a saucepan, and just start that on low heat. And I also, when I was making the cheesecake, I had leftover, I reserved about, I don't know, probably a tablespoon of the fresh squeezed lemon juice and maybe a teaspoon of the zest. That's going in here. And then obviously, as sour as this liquid is, you're going to need a bit of sugar, granulated sugar, to offset the sour notes. So I would say with 2 cans, I strained that out. I probably got maybe a cup and a half of liquid. So I'm going to try what do I have here? A half cup of granulated sugar. This is organic, so it's kind of lumpy. So that's a half cup, and then I'll taste it to see how that is. I'm just going to sit that. It is a bit lumpy. So also going into this is going to be a couple of tablespoons of this non-GMO cornstarch. Depends on how thick you want it. If you kind of want it a little runnier, you could just go with one tablespoon. I'm going to try 2 just to see how that thickens. As it starts to come up to temperature, it'll thicken. Okay, so while this is coming up to temperature, I'm going to also put in half of a vanilla bean here, the seeds from. So it'll thicken substantially, and so then what you're left with here is sort of a viscous cherry liquid, almost jam-like. As I said, when it cools, it thicken. And I'm also going to add in one tablespoon or so of Kerry unsalted butter here into this as soon as it cools down, and smooth it out. And that's just for a little bit of mouthfeel. Whether your life is like a big bowl of sour cherry conserves, or if it seems like someone just left you the pits, one thing I can tell you is that a slice of this cheesecake will help you forget about all your problems, at least for a minute or 2. So it's been in the refrigerator for about almost I'd say 15 hours chilling, which is about what you want. You know, you want to make sure that it really gets nice and chilled out before you try to unmold it. And now it's time to see what this thing looks like. So if you've prepared your pan properly, the way I described in the beginning of the video, you should have no problems unmolding your cheesecake. However, it's always good just to make sure nothing's sticking to run a small offset spatula around the outside just to make sure. And then it should just be a simple matter of taking off the rim. And that's the reason why that release so easy is because of the parchment. So you should be able to run the little offset spatula underneath the parchment circle on the bottom and be able to get your hand in there and just put that onto your cake circle. I'm just going to use a super sharp chef's knife here, and to keep your knife clean, just dip it in some very hot water and wipe off the water. And I'm going to cut another slice here. That's what that looks like. So that's the texture that you're really looking for with a properly baked cheesecake. Very dense, but still nice and creamy in the center. So this was a classic New York style cheesecake with a sour cherry conserve, made completely from scratch. And now I'm just gonna have to see what this tastes like. A big old bite of that. Gotta get some cherries in there. Oh yeah. Wow. Tell you what, I try to reserve the words sublime and ethereal for things that really are. If you undertake this task, which admittedly, you know, it's a 2-day process, you know, because you got to let this chill for a long time before you get that kind of texture on it. But yeah, I hope you guys will give this a try. It really is extraordinary. And yeah, there's really not much else to say. It's absolutely incredible, outstanding even. So thank you for joining me. And so now I'm going to go eat this. Would you guys mind hitting the dishes? Thanks.